Hey everybody, it's Friday, and you know what Friday means? Friday means it's Star Trek Day, and we are on disc 6 of season 3. We're doing episode 171. Please check out my previous videos of the Hollows 169, Poor Barclay, and the holodeck. The most toys. Felt bad for Data. Please check out that one. Today we're doing Sarek, episode 179. There is a voice overview in the beginning. But the Enterprise has been given a singular honor of hosting the first meeting between the Federation and the mysterious race known as the Ligarans. We are in orbit around Vulcan, preparing to welcome aboard Federation Ambassador Sarek and his wife Perrin, who, like his first wife, is from Earth. Then we see Captain Picard and Riker are headed towards the transporter room. Riker says, I remember studying his career in school. The Treaty of Alpha Cygnus 9, the coordinated admission into the Federation, the Klingon Alliance. Picard says, once. I met him once, many years ago at his son's wedding. Why couldn't he just say Spock? What's up with that? I can tell you that was quite a moment for a young lieutenant, standing in the presence of such history. I remember he spoke to me and I just stood there grinning like an idiot. And before we get started, please hit the like and subscribe and the thumbs up and let me know I'm doing a good job. This is the D. Louise Book Series channel. I'm Kristina, Kristina. Please consider sticking out for this whole video. I took literally, not kidding, 7 hours to go through this video. So please, please, please stick around. So they continue. Riker says, you tongue-tied? Picard says, indeed. How do you make small talk with someone who shaped the Federation? Riker says, is it true he will be retiring after this mission? Picard says, unofficially, that is what I hear. What a crowning achievement for his career. The benefits of relations with the Ligarians are incalculable. So, hey, there are an awful lot of extras in this episode. We have 2 extras over here, and then there are extras on the bridge. There are extras in almost every scene. It's amazing. Can you imagine the bragging rights? Even if you had no lines. It doesn't matter if you had any lines or not. But the fact that you can say that you were on Star Trek. So what if it was an extra? Who cares? You got to be on set. You got to meet everybody. Maybe get an autograph or 2. That's bragging rights forever. I'm serious. So the next scene is in the transporter room, and Colomini, Chief O'Brien, is there. I don't know why, but I always get excited about his appearance. I always thought he should have been a permanent member of the crew. Wonder what his day job was. Do you think the few lines on the show every so many episodes paid for his bills? Or because he had a regular job, what was his employer like when Colomini went into the office and said, oh, I need some time off, I gotta go film Star Trek? Unless, of course, if you guys know, what other shows was he guest starring on? I don't know. I'd have to look. So like I said, we have the extras in the transporter room. The 2 men beam in. The first guy says, I am Kay Mendoza of the Ambassador's Chief of Staff, and introduces Sarek as his personal assistant. Now, when you look at this guy, I immediately, don't ask me why, but I immediately think of Bruce McGill. His name is William Dennis, but he makes me and reminds me think of Bruce McGill, the guy from Rizzolian Isles. So the 2 men beam in, and he says, I am Kay Mendoza, and Ambassador's Chief of Staff, and this is Sakash, his personal assistant. What? You want to get down? Get down. Get down. The whole gang is here. You just can't see them. Casanova. Casanova. Come here, sidekick. Casanova. Come on. Come on. Come on. Don't be afraid of the girls. There's a girl behind you. That's why. Come here. Come on. Come on, jump. You can jump. It's only 2 feet. Come on. Come on, Casanova. Casanova. He got chicken and sat down. Casanova. 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 What about you? Smokey. Smoke. Smokey. You're not going to kill Casanova. Smokey. She's going to kill Casanova. Oh, good God. He's the boy in the house and he's afraid of girls. Doesn't matter who, which, where, when, he's afraid of girls. So, did you really? She got down and attacked him. Casanova, come here. You're only going to be safe over here. Come here. All right. Go hang out up there. Stay up there. Stay in the safety zone. Sorry. Smokey, here, come here. Take the paper. Come on. Come here. Be a good girl. Oh, she's so vicious. So where was I? So he says he's Mendozen, and he says he's Kansash, the personal assistant, and he tells Picard that Sarek will be joining them momentarily, but first we must discuss some matters of utmost delicacy. And Picard and Riker just look at each other. Then Picard tells the guy to go ahead, and he says, to be frank, Captain, are we still using that phrase in the 25th century, to be frank? Oh, I just say it. To be frank, Captain, the ambassador is not a young man. He tires easily. Sakas jumps in and says he's going to need a lot of rest to prepare himself for the difficult job that awaits him. Mendozen then says why it is imperative that he be allowed to conserve his strength. I request that you dispense with any formal activities normally associated with a visitor of his rank. Riker says, we had planned a ship's concert this evening, Riker says. I believe the ambassador is extremely fond of Mozart. Mendozen says, I'm afraid it would be impossible for him to attend. Upon his arrival, he will be taken directly to his quarters, where he will remain in seclusion until Agaran 4. Our extras, we get to see them. Yay! Bragging rights forever! So then Sarek and his wife Perrin beam in. Picard says, welcome aboard the Enterprise, Ambassador Sarek. Sarek says, we come to serve. Picard says, your service honors us. Sarek introduces his wife. Picard says, Mr. Sarek. She says, please, Captain, call me Perrin. Picard introduces Riker. Perrin then asks the captain to show them to their quarters. Sarek says he prefers to see the conference room first. Mendozen interrupts and says, Ambassador, I'm sure Saket and I can handle all the necessary details. Sarek puts his foot down metaphorically and says he will examine the conference room for himself. Perrin says, perhaps it would be best if we settled first. Sarek says to the captain, they worry about my health, Captain, too much. You will take me to the conference room, please. After the opening credits, Wesley and Geordi are looking at some weird liquid. Wesley asks, are the Ligurians really going to sit in this stuff? Geordi says, well, I'm not. Wesley says, can you believe this smell? Geordi says, what smell? Wesley looks at him. Geordi says, what can I say? To us, it's a slime pit, but to them, it's home. Wesley says, the environmental controls are ready. What's next? Geordi says, what? Are you in some kind of hurry or something? Wesley says, yeah, I have a date. Geordi says, a date? With whom? Wesley says, Ensign Dumont. Geordi says, really? She's very attractive. I got to admit, Wes, I thought I am a bit surprised. Wes, what? That she'd go out with me? No, that you actually got the courage up to ask her out. So wait a second. So then Sarek walks in. Um, says the room is not ready. Picard says no, Commander. No. Commander LaForge and Ensign Crusher are still preparing. Sarek interrupts Picard. He says that the Ligarians are very sensitive about protocol and tells them to remove all the furniture from the room. Even the walls must be bare. Mendrosin interrupts and says he is sure everything will be set up according to our specifications before the Ligarians arrive. Isn't that right, Captain? Picard then says, I assure you, Ambassador, everything will be ready before the conference begins. Perrin says, my husband and I have every confidence in you, Captain. Sarek says, I worked for 93 years in preparation for this meeting. It is vital that no detail be overlooked. Be on camera. I don't want to be on camera. Goodbye. Where was I? Picard says, then I assure you, Ambassador, everything will be ready before the conference begins. Perrin says, my husband and I have every confidence in you. Sarek says, I've worked 93 years in preparation for this meeting. It is vital that no details be overlooked. Sarek gets a little emotional, which is rare for a Vulcan. Saketh interrupts him and says, perhaps we should allow these gentlemen to return to their work, Ambassador. Sarek agrees. Before leaving, he says the walls are too bright. The next scene is on the bridge. We have extras again. And they're not the same ones from the transport room. More bragging rights. Riker says Mendrosin described him. I expected to see a frail old man. Picard says, I hope I'm that frail when I'm 202 years old. But his aides did seem to be a little overprotective, didn't they? Riker says, from what I could see, the ambassador doesn't need protection from anything. Picard says, well, we respect Mr. Mendrosin's request and allow Ambassador Sarek's privacy. I suppose they were foolish and vain my expectations of this voyage, sharing his thoughts, memories, his unique understanding of the history he's made. Just wait. Troy asks, does this mean you're going to cancel the concert this evening? Picard says, no, the concert will go ahead as scheduled, but it's a pity our guest of honor will be absent. Riker says, for all we know, the ambassador might enjoy evening's entertainment. Troy says, why not ask his wife if she would like to attend? Picard says, it's an excellent idea, Counselor. You have the bridge, number one, and he leaves. So, the next scene, we are in Sarek's room. And Picard comes in and says he's hoping he's not interrupting. Perrin says, no, not at all, but that Sarek is in meditation at the moment. Picard says, actually, I came to see you. Perrin says, well, how nice. I so rarely get visitors of my own. Usually everyone wants to see the ambassador. Picard says, I find that hard to believe. Perrin says, thank you, and offers a seat. And then says, these quarters are quite comfortable. The ambassador and I were pleased when we heard that the negotiations were going to take place aboard the flagship of the Federation. Picard says, the honor is ours. Perrin says, my husband has taken an interest in your career. He finds it to be satisfactory. Wow, satisfactory. Picard says, my word, high praise from a Vulcan. Perrin says some people expect an emotional response from Vulcans to be quite cold when they are really being. Picard interrupts and says logical. Perrin says exactly. Picard says, I came to invite you and and if your husband is available to a Mozart recital this evening. Perrin says, what a tempting offer. I doubt the ambassador will be able to attend, but I will make it a point to ask him. Picard says, I hope to see you this evening. Perrin says, as I do. She seems worried about something. After Picard leaves, she goes in to see Sarek. And Apparently, he's having trouble meditating. I want to say that this scene bothered me greatly. Absolutely bothered the life out of me. Um, Wesley says the temperature in the tank is 150 Celsius. Geordi says, okay, lock it off. Wesley says, is that it? Can I get out of here now? Geordi says, what's your hurry? You don't really think anything is going to happen with Susan DeMont, do you? Wesley says, at least I'm not spending the night with a good book like some people. Geordi says, what's that supposed to mean? Wesley says, what does, just what it sounds like. Geordi says, tell me something. You'll get more action out of a good book than you'll ever see on this date. I'll guarantee it. She's not going to waste her time on someone like you. Wesley says, someone like me? Geordi says, yeah, she's way out of your league. Well, Wesley says, well, since when did you become an expert on women? Geordi says, compared to you, every male on this ship is an expert on women. Wesley touches Geordi and says, well, at least I don't have to find my women on the hollow deck. Geordi says, what did you say? Then Riker walks in, says, is something wrong? Nobody says anything. Wesley says, leaves, and Riker asks Geordi if there's anything he'd like to talk about, and Geordi says no. Okay, the next scene is the Mozart concert, and Data is playing. I think I'm going to say this later, but I'm going to say it now. Does Brent Spinner actually play the violin? We'll talk about that. So, Picard says, I noticed that Worf put Ensign D'Amato on report for insubordination. Riker says D'Amato has been an exemplary officer. Picard asks Riker to look into it. Picard greets Crusher and says, I presume the work is progressing on the conference room? Riker says, yes. I checked in with Wesley and Geordi a few hours ago. There was a moment when I actually thought the two of them were going to hit each other. I like how everybody stands when Sarek enters the room. Always, when royalty enters the room, you stand up. Show your appreciation. Picard and Riker greet them. Sarek tells him it was his wife's idea and she can be quite logical when she chooses to. Picard says Data will have a solo and Data starts playing. Again, let's be a minute. So, can Brent Spinner really play? And during the musical, Sarek cries. And several people notice he cries. This scene I also didn't like. Wesley Crusher says his mom wanted to see him. Dr. Crusher says, I thought you were going to be at the concert last night. Wesley says, I said I might be going. Suzanne wanted to go to the arbitorium. Dr. Crusher says, Captain Picard asked her where you were. I don't like making excuses for you. Wesley says, excuses? Come on, Mom. It wasn't an official function. Dr. Crusher says, listen, young man, you have responsibilities and I want you to live up to them. Wesley says, don't you think you're overreacting a little bit? Dr. Crusher says, don't talk back to me. Wesley says, okay, I won't, and starts to leave. Then Dr. Crusher grabs him and says, where do you think you're going? And Wesley says, away from you, and she hits him. Like I said, this whole scene is just uncomfortable. The next scene, Dr. Crusher is explaining the incident with her son to Troy. Dr. Crusher says she wasn't thinking about anything. She was just angry. Joy says, and Wes didn't provoke you in any way? It wasn't anything he said or anything he did. Dr. Crusher says, no, that's just it. It was a sudden burst of anger. I still can't believe I did it. Troy says, I don't know why you did it either, but I can tell you I've heard the same story from 10 different people over the last 2 days. Something's wrong, and we the viewers know it's Sarek, but it takes them a while, and it's always frustrating how long it takes them. Because we know, but they got to investigate. Right, the next scene, we're on the bridge of the Enterprise, and Data is showing Sarek around. Where did I come up with these names? Data says, Sarek says, "Is this the command center?" Data says, "Yes," and it's usually occupied by Commander Riker, Captain Picard, and Troy. And he says Troy is a Betazoid. Data says yes, half. Her father was human. Second says she's not a true telepath. Data says her skills are empathic in nature. She's able to sense the emotions of other beings. Second says, what is Captain Picard's background in diplomacy? Data says extensive. The captain's first diplomatic contact dates back to, and he goes on. I'd like to point out, there's a girl in Data seat, really pretty. Then we have a guy here and another guy there. Look at all these extras. Never seen so many extras before. And nobody gets killed. That's amazing. All these extras and nobody's getting killed. I just had to point that out. Sarek interrupts Data with his spiel and asks what of the Ligurians. Would he be able to conduct negotiations with them should the need arise? Data asks, does he see circumstances occurring? And some Ambassador Sarek unable. Sarek says, forgive, I was merely exploring various possibility permutations of our mission. Your tour of the bridge has been informative, and he leaves. Now, again, I want to point this out. We know it's coming in 10 forward. We know the big, huge scene that's coming here. Why is there a little kid? There should not be a little kid in this particular scene. For what happens in this scene, there should not be a little kid. But I'm also appreciative of Colin Meaney's expanded role in this episode. He's doing more than being in the transporter room, which is cool. I like that. So again, I don't like the fact that they had the kid in this room. And I don't think anybody reflects on it later, but why was the kid in the room when this stuff was going on? So then Brian goes over to the table, and it was that whole kindergarten, elementary school thing, you're sitting in my seat thing. Did they really have to stoop to that childish level of you're sitting in my seat thing? He couldn't have just sat someplace else. And it escalates from here. And even Geordi tries to break it up at some point. But again, the kid's still here. So the next scene, Riker and Worf are walking in the hallway. Riker says, I don't have to tell you, insubordination is a serious charge to be filed against any officer. Worf says he is aware of that. However, Ensign D'Amato directly challenged his authority. Riker says, is it my imagination or have tempers become a little frayed on the ship lately? Worf said, I hadn't noticed. Then they walk into this. And I still don't like the fact that the kid was here in the beginning of the scene. I don't know. I'm not going to microscope every person in this room to see if the kid is still here. But it just doesn't work with me. The next scene is Troy telling the captain this is not an isolated incident. There have been reports of random violence all over the ship. Picard says, are you saying that this is somehow contagious? Dr. Crusher says there's no indication of any bacteria or virus. I've run every test I know. I've checked the water, food, replicator, and borne samples. Picard says this is a hell of a time. Well, whatever it is, I don't want it to affect the ambassador. I want his quarters isolated from the rest of the crew until we have identified the cause. Troy says it's not that simple, Captain. Dr. Crusher says we have determined the outbreak of violence started at virtually the same time that Sarek and his party beamed into the ship. Oh, she doesn't have a comm badge. I just thought I'd point that out. The next scene is in sickbay. Dr. Crusher says we have a working theory. We believe that possible that the ambassador Sarek himself is responsible for these incidents. Picard says, Sarek? Troy says, I felt something during the concert, vague and undefined, but very disturbing. Picard said he cried. I saw that. I couldn't believe it. A Vulcan moved to tears by music. It's Troy interrupts and says, well, Vulcans do have the same basic emotions we do. They just have learned to repress them. When I sensed during the concert was that he lost control. Picard says, what could cause such a loss of control? Dr. Crusher says there's a very rare condition that sometimes affects Vulcans over the age of 200. Van Dyke syndrome. Its early symptoms include sudden bursts of emotion, mostly irrational anger. Eventually, all emotional control is lost. Picard says that I can imagine nothing that would be more offensive to a Vulcan. Their emotional detachment is the core of their being. Why would this affect others on the ship? Troy says Vulcans possess telepathic abilities. Sarek may be unintentionally projecting intense emotions onto the other people at random. Picard says, and when the Legalians come aboard, Troy says they too could be very well affected. Picard says, is there a treatment? Dr. Crusher says, can't someone else take his place? Picard says Sarek has built a personal relationship with them. They will accept no one else. How can we confirm your diagnosis? Dr. Crusher says we can grow a tissue sample of the methasomasis, but the results will take several days. Picard says I only have 12 hours. He looks so much like that guy from Rosalian Isles. I can't get it out of my head. I know he's not, but I still can't get it out of my head. So Medrosin says, that's not possible, Captain. I can't delay the conference, not for a day, not for an hour. The schedule itself requires 3 months of negotiation. Picard says, nevertheless, we appear to be facing a potentially. Medrosin interrupts the captain. I give you my word of honor that the ambassador is in perfect health. Is that enough? Picard says, Mr. Medrosin. Mr. Medrosin interrupts and says, you are dealing with a theory full of holes, Captain. Why am I not affected by Sarek's supposed condition? And parent, how could his wife function normally if this theory of yours is correct? Picard says, I cannot explain that, but hundreds of others on board have not been affected. I have not. It appears to be random. Proximity apparently has no bearing on this phenomenon. Bendrosian says you accusing the greatest man of his time of losing his mind on the eve of the greatest triumph, and you cannot explain why. I won't report this to the ambassador for the moment. I don't want to divert his attention from the mission. But if I were you, in the interest of your career, I'd be very concerned about finding the real cause of these outbursts before the Ligarans arrive. Picard calls Data. In the next scene, Data is talking to Sakath. Picard is not satisfied with the OK Mendoza assurances that the ambassador is in good health. Do you consider Sarek capable of carrying out his mission? Saka says, have I given you cause to think otherwise? Data says, you have voiced certain reservations to me about his abilities. Saka says, I don't recall making such a statement. Data says, not directly, but you did question me about the diplomatic capabilities of the Captain Picard and Counselor Troy. Saka says, I am honor bound to help Sarek out his mission. That is the only answer I can give you. Data says, then you must decide which is your greater obligation, your loyalty to Sarek or your duty to the Federation. Can you accept the logic of continuing the mission? Saras, tell your captain the mission is in jeopardy. We're back on the bridge again, and we got extras again. Whole bunch of extras. Um, Data is reporting that Sacketh has been able until recently to use his telepathic ability skills to reinforce Sarek's emotional control, thus protecting others from the effects of his deterioration. Riker says he hasn't been doing a very good job. Data says the strain of this mission on Sarek has made it impossible. Picard says it's ironic, isn't it? All this magnificent technology, and we find ourselves sustainable to the ravages of old age. I would like to add here cancer, Alzheimer's, and a million other incurable diseases at this point. Maybe in the future we'll be able to cure them. maybe if we stopped selling tobacco and started working on cures in the medical field, it would happen sooner. If we made medical care free to everybody, um, people would get treated earlier for things. But there's a lot of people in this world who cannot afford to go to seek medical care or cannot afford medicine. That's a real thing in this world. Um, I have Picard continues with the loss of dignity, the slow betrayal of our bodies by forces we cannot master. I have a relative who is literally dying minute by minute. This person has very, very bad Alzheimer's. And it's to the point where they do not know how to use the utensils. They do not have to have guidance in the restroom. They are unable to eat. Um, because of the conditions of the establishment they're in, I don't know why. I can't answer those questions. But apparently, they will not give IV fluids or anything like that because they're not a hospital situation. So they try and feed this person, and this person has lost the ability to chew. If you put a plate of chicken nuggets in front of them, they will reach for the chicken nuggets and forget what they were reaching for. Even though they can physically see it, they will forget that they were reaching for it. So this person is literally starving to death, and there's nothing that can be done. I'm expecting that call any day. It's heart-wrenching to see one of your relatives have that happen. My mother, on the other hand, was so frightened of this happening to her that she talked herself into a heart attack and died over 20 years ago. And I was young. I was really young. But so to see there are millions of other people where your relative may not be slowly dying of Alzheimer's, but they may be slowly dying of cancer or any other ailment where the person just literally disintegrates very slowly. It's very, very sad. And this particular incident is because Dead is reporting on this, and then Riker and Picard get into a shouting match, and Data breaks it up, and they realize that they have too become infected with this thing. It's just the whole situation is just really sad. They should Bandai system, I guess, would be. I mean, this was what 30 years ago. Look how bad Alzheimer's is today, and it's still a thing. And they've been, they've been trying to work on it for 30 years, and they've made some progress, but not enough. They're too busy. The rich people in this world are too busy with their own comforts. They really don't care about the little people. They just don't care. And there are some people, they're Maseratis and they go out to dinner and spend $10,000 on dinner. The rest of us could live on that money for years. And the people out there in Hawaii or California but there's little people all over the world in foreign countries. We send all this money to foreign countries when you wonder who gets it. You would like to just give it to the people on the streets and make them nice housing, at least clean housing, so they don't have to live on the street. But it's just so bad in this country. It's really hard. I'm sorry I got off topic, but it was just a soapbox that we are comfortable leaving people on the street. You see them with the shopping carts. You see them sleeping in covers. It's just, and then people go, we'll build a homeless shelter, we'll build this, and then there's the people go, not in my neighborhood. But to watch your loved one literally disintegrate in front of you microscopically is horrifying. When they forget who you are, when they forget who they are, when they end up in a nursing home with a few meager belongings, it's really just heart-wrenching. It really is. So anyways, we go through all this scene. Again, my little soapbox. Picard has a talk with Perrin, and I know I've been there and I've had people do it in front of me. The denial that there is nothing wrong, that they're fine mentally, when the signs are all over the place screaming, yes, there's something wrong, but everybody around you tries to make things better and fix things and make it comforting. And some people may be able to get some medical help, and most people won't because either they don't have the money or they're in denial. And if they have the money, they could still be in denial. So Picard is talking to Perrin and saying, I don't think I understand. My husband is responsible for your crew assaulting one another. Captain Picard says he is very ill. Perrin says Bendai syndrome is more a folktale than a disease. There hasn't been a true case of it in my husband's lifetime. Picard says there is now. Sakath, and Perrin says Sakath knows nothing. My husband didn't teach him. Picard says he knows, and more than that, on this mission he has been consciously holding Sarek's mind together as weak as well as he could. Perrin says it's not true. Picard says I must see Sarek. Perrin says I know a good deal about the Vulcan mind, and I know a good deal about the heart of one particular Vulcan. I am his wife, and he is fine. He does not have Bendai syndrome, and that is the end of it. Denial. Your relative has Alzheimer's. Oh, no, they don't. Well, yeah, they do. And I know that people I know literally denied up and down, backwards and frontwards, that my relative had Alzheimer's. Oh, they called it dementia. It was a nicer word than Alzheimer's. Yeah, but now she's in a home being cared for by others, and she can't chew by herself. Someone has to chew for her, move a drawer up and down, put food in her mouth. She's almost a vegetable by this point. And you start out with denial, and sorry, I won't go there. So Sarek comes in. Sarek must not do what, my wife? Picard wishes to see me, he may do so. Sarek says, I regret that we have seen so little of each other during this voyage, Captain. Picard says, the loss is mine, Ambassador. My Mendrosian says, Captain, may I talk with you in private? Sarek stops him. Sarek, you are speaking of your belief that I suffer from Bendai syndrome. I have been accused of many things in my life, never in excess of motion. Picard says, Sarek, Perrin, I see no reason to continue this discussion. Sarek, on the contrary, I wish to assuage any fears the captain may have regarding my capabilities. I believe there is a test for Bendai syndrome, and I will take it immediately. Picard says, unfortunately, the results would not be available for several days, which is why I must ask for postponement of the conference. Sarek says that would be a mistake, Captain. I give you my word that I am in perfect health. Then why must Sakis help to maintain your motion? Sarek asks if that's true. Mendoza says, no, Ambassador, absolutely not. Sarek asks Perrin, were you aware of this? Sakis, I wait an answer. He tells Sarek that he's been using his mental abilities to strengthen your mental discipline. Sarek says your efforts will no longer be required. Sakis says that would not be wise. Sarek says it may not be wise, but it is necessary. Sakis leaves the room. Sarek asks them to leave. I wish to speak with the captain privately. So then, Picard talks to Sarek. Picard says, I hope I have not embarrassed you, Ambassador. Sarek says, you seem to forget, Captain, that I am Vulcan. I am not affected by emotional considerations. Picard says, I think you are affected, sir, far more than you realize. Sarek says, I'm a logical being. Present your arguments, I will listen. Picard says, there's an epidemic of violence incidents aboard the Enterprise. As we speak, the situation is worsening. Sarek says, and it is your hypothesis that I am the cause of these incidents. Picard says, yes. My medical officer has explored all the other probable causes. I share your concern for your crew. However, you must agree that it is not unusual for a ship to encounter unexplained phenomena. That is correct. Therefore, I can assure you that I am not the cause of your difficulties. The logical course would be to have your doctor continue the search. She is, in fact, also stated that these incidents started shortly after your arrival. As your entire argument to be based upon mere coincidences, it's also coincidence that your wife and your chief of staff are carefully isolating you. Ah, I believe I see the flaw in your logic. You are reacting to overprotective attitudes towards me. They are somewhat emotional concern for my age. Picard said, surely Sakis cannot be influenced by emotion. Sarek says, I am not to be blamed for the judgment of a child. Sakis is young and inexperienced. He's erred in his assumption that I need medical help. And it goes off, and Sakis realizes that, you know, it's in his face. So, the next scene, there's a captain's overview. In 3 hours, we are scheduled to meet with the Ligurian delegation. However, it is now all too evident that Ambassador Sarek is in no condition to proceed with the conference. Riker says, we are entering the Ligurian system, sir. Shall I have Mr. Worf contact the ambassador? Picard says, no, I will present our regrets to the Ligurians personally. It is vital that they understand our reasons for canceling these negotiations. Riker says, Captain, I think you did the right thing. Picard says, but at what cost? Then Perrin enters the room, and she must speak with the captain, and so Riker leaves. Perrin says, I have come to ask you to reconsider your position. Picard says, you know that is impossible. Perrin says, Sarek is a good man. He has given the Federation lifetime of service. I beg you to let him keep the respect he has earned. Picard says he will never lose that respect. Perrin says, Menjosin and I have never wanted to deceive you. My husband's condition came on him so gradually, it was easy for us to delude ourselves and pretend nothing was wrong. We convinced ourselves that he could complete this one last task and end his career with dignity. Help him, Captain, help him. We gain his pride and honor. Again, Alzheimer's. That this whole thing. Somebody somewhere uh, knew that their relative had Alzheimer's, and everybody denies it up the yin yang until they're sitting in a home, just sitting there staring, unable to eat, unable to drink, unable to do anything but just sit there. It's heart wrenching. So she suggests the mind meld. Do you so Sarek says, do you realize the dangers involved when you are proposing, Captain? Picard says, yes, I do. I realize the potential benefits. Sarek said we would be linked telepathically, sharing our thoughts, becoming one in essence, one mind. Picard says, for which a few hours would provide you the emotional control you need. In that time, you can meet with the Ligurians and conclude the treaty. Sarek said, it is a generous offer, but I must warn you that while I would regain your stability, you would experience the fierce onslaught of emotions unleashed by my condition. Walking emotions are extremely intense. We have learned to suppress them. No human could control them. They will overwhelm you, and the mind meld can be a terrible interest to me. I cannot allow it. Picard says, I am aware of the risk, but it is the only logical solution. Sarek, your courage honors me, Captain. So then we see an intimate moment with Beverly, sort of, kind of. I see that you are ready, Captain. Picard says, Dr. Crusher will monitor our responses. Sarek says, a sensible precaution, and they do the whole mind melt thing. Your mind, my mind. Oh, good grief. Done the mind meld, and Data, Riker is with Sarek, and successfully concluded the negotiations with the Bulgarians. The U.S. Merrimack. Oh, wait a minute. I skipped a scene. Sarek says, please inform the delegation that Sarek of Vulcan is on his way to welcome them. Riker says to Sarek, the mind meld was a success. Sarek says, all went well as planned. Riker says, if Captain Picard all right. Sarek says, don't worry, number one. Riker says, and the ambassador, I am myself again. It's been a long time. Then the next scene is Picard going through all the horrific emotions. Okay, then there's a voiceover. Riker says Ambassador Sarek has successfully concluded the negotiations with the Ligurians. The USS Merrimack has arrived and will transport the ambassador and his party back to Vulcan. Picard is saying, hopefully your journey aboard the Merrimack will be uneventful. Sarek says, with the pressures of the conference behind him, I believe I can help him maintain his control until we return to Vulcan. Riker says, what will happen to him there? Mendrosin says the effects of Bandai symptom are irreversible. Medical research is always continuing, of course. Cancer, Alzheimer's, all those rotten diseases out there. Parkinson's, all those diseases out there. Perrin says thank you to the captain. Picard tells her that Sarek loves her very much. Perrin says she knows. I have always known. Sarek comes in and says he will take his leave. I don't think we will meet again. Picard says, I hope you are wrong. Sarek says we shall always retain the best part of each other. Picard says, I believe the better part of that bargain, ambassador. And they do the live long and prosper thingy. So that kind of ends this episode.